Hi there. Do you think it is possible to talk about the past of past? Yes, it is. We have a tense here which can help us talk about the past event of another past event. Let's talk about past perfect tense today. When we talk about past perfect, we first need to understand present perfect tense. In my video of present perfect tense, I had told you the basic concept of that tense, which means present perfect is used for those actions which have just happened or right before the present moment. If I show it to you on the timeline, for the present perfect, we can have an action somewhere around here which is right before the present moment. But if I want to talk about an action which has happened long time back, then I will take it in the past. But if there is one more action which has happened right before the past, then I can use past perfect tense here. In the present perfect tense, we talk about actions which are right before the present moment. Similarly, in the past perfect tense, we talk about actions which are right before another past actions. So past perfect is generally used when there are two actions happening in the past and the previous action or the first action which happened will always take the past perfect form. So today when we are talking about this tense, let us look at its format, when to use this tense and what mistakes to avoid while using this tense. We'll also compare this tense with the simple past as well. Let's begin with our lesson today on past perfect tense. Okay, so let's take first things first. Unless we know how to form this tense, obviously we won't be able to use it. And the formation of this tense is somewhat on the same lines of simple past tense, where whether the subjects are singular or plural is completely irrelevant. Let's look at the three categories here now, and I have made a list of all the subjects that we can use with it. I, we, you, they, he, she, it, and anybody's name. Unlike in present perfect, we used have, if you remember. Here we are going to use had with, obviously, wherever there is a perfect tense, we will always use the V3 form of the verb. Now V3 form is also called as the past participle form. Let's take the verb sleep. What are the three forms of sleep? Sleep, slept, slept. So here in V3 form we are getting the word slept, and that is what I'm going to use in all the examples here. So let's start. I had, what is the V3 form? Slept, right? So I had slept, we had slept, you had slept, they had slept, he had slept, she had slept, it had slept, and Arun had slept, Sanskriti had slept. Very easy to understand. Let's look at the negative format of this, and this is also equally easy. All you have to do is just put a not after had. Now had not can also be written in the contracted form like hadn't, and we can make our sentences in this negative form with the past participle of the verb, that is V3. Okay, let's start. I had not slept. Again the V3 form of the verb here also. We had not slept. You hadn't slept. He hadn't slept. She hadn't slept. It had not slept. Arun had not slept. Sanskriti had not slept. Fine. Now let's go to the interrogative section, where we will learn making both positive and negative interrogative sentences. Let's begin. Now, as discussed in every tense, the auxiliary verb will always come first whenever we are making interrogative. And since in past perfect we are using had as the auxiliary verb, so we'll put it first at the beginning of the sentence. And let's start. Had I If you want to make a negative interrogative, you can use the not, else you leave it. So I can make had I and then the V3 form, slept, and a question mark, never to forget in interrogatives. Had we not slept? Had you slept? Had they not slept? Had he slept? Had she slept? Had it not slept? And had Arun not slept? Had Sanskriti slept? Now, there can be a twist here. If I want to make negative interrogative, instead of making had and not separately, I can also use the contracted form. But when I use the contracted form, the format will be a little different. Let's see how it will be. If I have to use hadn't here, then the verb hadn't will come first. So it will be hadn't, I, and then I will not use the word not. I will straight away jump to the verb. So the sentence will be hadn't I slept? Hadn't we slept? Hadn't he slept? Hadn't she slept? That's how we'll make the sentences in interrogatives, negative and positive formats of this tense. Now, simple past and past perfect tense always go hand in hand with each other. And both these tenses are used when we are talking about two actions happened in the past, wherein one action happened earlier than the other one. If you look at this timeline, I have shown here that in past, two actions happened, action 1 and action 2. So whatever happened first will always take the past perfect tense, and whatever happened next in the past will always take the simple past. Okay, now let's look at some examples here. When we reached the station, the train had already left. This line says that when we reached the station, the train had already left. So what is the first action which has happened here? Leaving of the train, obviously. So the leaving of the train was the first action, and then after that we reached. So this reaching here was the second action. So as the rule says, first action past perfect, and that is why here we have the train had already left. It is in the past perfect form. Whereas second action simple past, we reached. This is in simple past. Let's look at one more example. By the time the storm began. Storm began, that's one action. Jerry had found a safe place in the forest. Had found. Okay, now there are two actions here. By the time storm began, we can consider here on the timeline. By the time storm began, Jerry had found a safe place. So before the storm began, Jerry had found a safe place in forest. So which action must have been the first action here? Here with Jerry? Correct. So this was the first action, and then after that the storm began. So this is the second one. And what does the rule say? First action past perfect tense, second action simple past. Now let's see when to use this tense. Let's look at all the points properly one by one. The first point says that we use this tense for actions before a certain time in past. So in a sentence, if you are referring to a particular time in the past, then any action before that time will take the past perfect tense. For example, at 6 a.m. Now if you see here, this is the time reference in the past. At 6 a.m. Shaina had left for the station. Now before this time, any action, or at this time, any other action that had happened will take the past perfect form. Now had denotes the auxiliary verb used in the past perfect, and left is the V3 form of the verb. That is past participle form of the verb. Let's look at the next one. Martina had played her first international match at the age of 14. So at the age of 14 is a kind of time reference given to us, and any action before this time or at this time will take the past perfect form. So had played here will be the past perfect tense. Next is for an action before another action. Now I have already told you that if there are two actions which have happened in the past, the earlier action will take the past perfect, whereas the second action will take the simple past. Let's look at these examples again. We had checked all the rooms before we went out to search for Fisher. Now see, here there are two actions happening. One is the checking of the rooms, and second one is going out to search for Fisher. Now out of these two actions, what happened first? Check. We had checked all the rooms before. Now this time verb tells us what happens before and what happens after. Okay, so the action that happens first will always take the past perfect form, whereas the action that happens second or the later one will always take the simple past form. Look at the next example. I had already done the task. Had done already. Okay, I had already done the task when the teacher announced a surprise checking. Now announced is another action. So here there are two actions happening. Had already done the task is one action, and announced a surprise checking is the second action. So the action which happened first is this one, and therefore it has taken past perfect form, whereas the action which happened later will take the simple past form. Now this tense is also used to express unfulfilled wish or unfulfilled conditions. Let's look at both the categories here. For expressing unfulfilled desires of the past, the desire has to be in the past, that you must remember. For example, I wish I had worked a little harder before the exams. Now this is an unfulfilled past desire, that if I had worked harder, I would have done a little better in the exams. But unfortunately, that couldn't happen. Now look at the next one. If only he had valued the love for elders, but unfortunately, he did not value. So in such ways, we can express unfulfilled desires of the past. Now, we can also use this for unfulfilled conditions of the past. For example, if you had run faster, now this becomes the condition. What would have been the result? You would have won the race. So we can use this in conditional sentences also. Next, if he had written neatly, had written, and this becomes the conditional part because it has if and it gives out a condition. What would have been the result? He would have got better marks. So this part becomes a condition and that becomes a result. Now these two sentences can also be reworded like this. Had he written neatly, and the rest of the sentence same. Now this tense can also be used along with a combination of certain adverbs like already, yet, for, since, never, ever, just, etc. Let's look at certain sentences which have these words and I'll tell you how they perform. Before we moved. Now this one is a past perfect, whereas already is an adverb which is used with this tense. Now next, when she arrived home, she hadn't heard. Now this is past perfect. The news yet. Now this is an adverb again. Next one, at the time I joined the company, I had been is a past perfect tense, a salesperson for 5 years. Now for here is a word which will tell you about the duration of the time in the past, like 5 years. And if you remember this, for will always take a duration of time, whereas since will always take a point of time. Look here, he had lived in New York since 2010. Now had lived is the past perfect tense and since is the word which tells us the starting point of the time when he started to live. Next, before they visited US, they had never seen. Now never here again becomes an adverb which is in combination with this tense. Next, we had just had lunch. Now what is the perfect tense here? Had. Alright, and just becomes an adverb here. Now you must be wondering, can we have two hads here? Yes, we can have two hads here because the first had works as an auxiliary verb as in past perfect tense, and the next had is another word for eaten. So I can also say we had just eaten lunch when our friends dropped in. Now after having a look at how to use, when to use, which words to use in the tense, let us have a look at when not to use this tense. There are certain cases, or there are maybe two cases here where this tense should not be used. The first case is that when two actions happen at the same time in the past. For example, when the commissioner reached the accident site, people rushed to him. Now if you see, there are two actions happening here, reaching of the commissioner and people rushing to him. Both these actions happened at the same time. So here we cannot say when the commissioner had reached. No, because this action happened when the second one happened simultaneously. So in such cases, we will use simple past for both the activities. The second case is if one action comes immediately after the other and both the actions are connected to each other. For example, when the soldier heard the enemy approach, he fired at him. Now these two actions happened one after the other, but they both are connected to each other. The second action was a result of the first one, and therefore in such case also we will use simple past for both the actions. Now if you are narrating certain events which happened one after the other, then the best tense to use here is simple past. But in case you are not going sequentially, then you can use a combination of simple past and past perfect. Here are two categories that I have made. In the first example, I have used only simple past. In the next one, I have shown how to make a combination of both these tenses. So I'll begin reading and underline the verbs as they come. I finished the paper and handed it over to the examiner. After taking my bicycle, I returned home. Then I went to the stadium for net practice. Now if you look at all these verbs, they are all in simple past because I have narrated that incident in the same manner in which the events occurred. But I did not want to do it. But there is another way out wherein you can use either a combination of two or only past perfect. But then there, in that case, you have to use certain adverbs of which will make your sentences strong. Let's read this. Before returning home, right? Okay. I had already handed over the paper to the examiner. I had taken my bicycle before I returned home. Now in the first case you can see that I have used only past perfect, but I have given a time reference also. In the next one I have used a combination of simple past and past perfect. So this becomes my past perfect tense, whereas this becomes simple past tense. But while making the combination, you should not forget that the first action will always take past perfect and the second action will always take simple past. Well, I have tried to incorporate all the points related to this tense in this video, and I hope that you understood. But unless you practice, this tense cannot be perfected. So to use past perfect easily in your written or in your spoken English, you need to practice this a lot. But here's one tip from my side. If you are a beginner in writing or speaking skills, then it's better to stick to simple tenses first. Simple present, simple past, or simple future. These tenses are easy to understand and easy to use. And as and when you develop those skills of expression, you can start using these tenses also. But nothing is impossible, and practice makes a man perfect. Thank you very much for this lovely time that you have given me. Thank you for watching the videos, and coming up is past perfect continuous. See you again in my next video. Goodbye and take very good care of yourself.